Some people still believe that being strong means swallowing your tears, smiling through the chaos, and saying, "I'm fine," when your soul is in pieces. What a lie. What no one tells you is that this made-up version of strength makes you sick, and it does so in silence. Here's the simple, uncomfortable truth. To be human is to be fragile, and the more you try to appear invincible, the more you lose the chance to truly heal. The internet taught you how to perform happiness, but it didn't teach you what to do when anxiety paralyzes you, or when sadness sticks to your skin and won't let go. No one posts about the panic at 3 a.m., about the trauma that sabotages relationships, or about the loneliness that consumes you even in a crowded room. But the truth is, everyone is carrying some pain they've never had the courage to say out loud. And that's where this video comes in. Because maybe what you're missing isn't motivation, it's compassion. A space where psychological pain is understood without judgment, where unspoken feelings finally get a name, with a treehouse that collapsed isn't a source of shame, but of learning. And if you're feeling like you need to make sense of the mess inside you, then maybe this is the beginning of your turning point. There was a moment when everything went silent, but it wasn't peace, it was overload. And that's when it happened. The mind started crying for help. Stepping away from social media didn't come as a trendy choice, but as a reflex of emotional exhaustion. Mental health was in shambles, disrupted by constant comparisons, unregulated dopamine, and the false sense of connection that the internet pretends to offer. This time, disconnection was a matter of survival. There were no goodbye posts, no dramatic stories, just the emptiness of the room, and the weight of emotions no one ever taught how to name. That suffocating anxiety, the panic that hits out of nowhere, the psychological pain with no clear source, all of it rising to the surface. When the body did what the mouth couldn't, scream. It felt like even the Wi-Fi had become an accomplice to the emotional chaos, a never-ending trail feeding the loneliness and erasing thoughts. No one prepares us for this moment, when the digital world no longer distracts, and all that's left is the mirror. And the mirror shows exhaustion, loss, vulnerability. In that moment, the way out was to go back to the basics, turning off the phone, lighting a candle, touching real paper with a real pen. Tiny analog gestures that slowly bring presence back. And maybe, just maybe, in that uncomfortable silence, the space finally opens up to talk about the pain no one sees, but that lives right there inside, knocking on the door. There's a kind of pain that doesn't come out through tears and doesn't scream through the body. It just stays there, stuck in the back of the throat, waiting for a safe conversation to finally break free. And the strange part? When someone asks, "Are you okay?" the answer is almost always automatic. Yeah, I'm fine. But on the inside, the heart is in airplane mode. Talking about invisible pain isn't about finding magical solutions. It's about giving what hurts a space to breathe. Because suppressed pain spreads. It turns into symptoms, into illness, into isolation. Sometimes, all someone really needs is a non-judgmental ear, a 10-minute phone call, an unhurried cup of coffee, a simple message that says, "I'm here." That alone can become a lifeline. You don't need the perfect words, not even a ready-made answer. Healing begins when pain is allowed to speak, even if it's shaky, even if it's shy, even if it doesn't quite make sense. And when it's met with compassion, something inside starts to reorganize. That's where language and emotion come into play. Even when words fail, gestures speak. An attentive gaze, a firm hug, a silence that stays. All of it speaks. And it's in that space of honest exchange that resilience is born. Because no one overcomes emotional trauma in silence. And those who felt it deep in their skin know. Pain only starts to ease when it stops being a secret. But what about when even talking doesn't help? When what you feel doesn't even have a name? That's when we enter a deeper layer still. There are feelings that resemble wild animals. The more you try to name them, the faster they run away. It's like there's an internal confusion that doesn't know whether it wants to scream or hide. These are pains that live in places where language simply doesn't reach. not because of a lack of vocabulary, but because the experience is too raw to be translated. And then comes the silence, but not the gentle kind. It's the kind that weighs on your chest, sticks to your skin, makes you feel like even if you said everything, no one would truly understand. This absence of words creates a void. You try to explain, but it's like speaking a language no one else speaks. Shame creeps in, shame for feeling what you feel, fear of seeming weak, fragile, or too much. And that's how loneliness is born, not from being alone, but from not being understood. A loneliness that chokes, that distorts even your own sense of emotional identity. The connection to the world fades, and disconnection becomes the default. In this state, unspoken emotions turn into ghosts, and the more they're ignored, the louder they haunt you. That's why some people start writing, painting, playing instruments, running, praying, not to perform, but because the body needs to release what the mouth couldn't handle. And even the smallest form of expression is already a beginning. But when even that doesn't bring relief, it becomes painfully clear. This isn't just about expressing. It's about understanding why. Even when you try to speak, it still feels like no word fits. The mind is clever, ingenious, even, but it has its limits. When the pain tightens, language begins to fail, like a microphone full of static. You try to explain, but everything comes out distorted. It's like trying to describe an earthquake using a child's vocabulary. You just can't. And at that point, those who've never suffered tend to say, "You're exaggerating. It's just drama. You need more faith." But those who've walked through grief, through depression, through the raw psychological pain, they know. They understand there are experiences that don't fit into any verb. Imagine trying to explain what it's like to lose a piece of yourself without even knowing exactly where it used to hurt, or trying to describe a kind of exhaustion that isn't physical, but existential. It almost feels like a cruel joke. You freeze, you stutter, you trip over your own words, not because you don't know what you feel, but because you feel so much. The words just jam. It's like there's an invisible keyboard inside your chest, and half the letters are broken. You try to type, "Help me," but all that comes out is a blank space. In those moments, language and emotion clash inside your head. Words feel like poorly written drafts in the face of such overwhelming experience. That's why so many people say, "I don't know how to explain it," because they really don't. And it's not a lack of intelligence. It's a surplus of feeling, an overload of untold, undigested stories. Communication stalls, but the pain stays. Silent, throbbing, unrelenting. And what's most haunting, when that pain is still alive, even after years have gone by. They say time heals everything. But what about when time passes and the pain is still there? Not with the same intensity, but with the same origin. A certain scent, an old song, a place that seems harmless. Any of it can reopen a wound you thought had already healed, but the body doesn't lie. It remembers. And when the pain runs deep, it defies the clock, ignores calendars, and shows up when you least expect it. It's not drama. It's not a lack of strength. It's not failure to move on. It's emotional biology. The brain stores trauma. With the same intensity, it stores survival. A perfume can be the trigger for unresolved grief. The sound of rain can pull you straight back into a childhood filled with loneliness. Sometimes a single offhand comment can tear down a wall that took years to build. And that's when the self-judgment begins. Why haven't I gotten over this yet? As if feeling were some kind of flaw. The real problem is that the just move on culture tramples the need for pause. We're not taught to respect internal time, only external timelines. But there's a time for everything. To cry, to remember, to rebuild. And the wild thing is, even when everything seems resolved, pain can return in disguise, as exhaustion, procrastination, or insomnia, because what isn't understood is relived. And it's in that emotional back and forth that you begin to learn the value of protecting what you've worked so hard to rebuild. Imagine someone who spent 12 years carefully building a treehouse, hammering piece by piece, selecting every plank of wood with intention, shaping each step with fragments of their own story. That treehouse wasn't just a structure. It was memory, shelter, emotional identity. And then, one ordinary day, without warning, lightning struck, and in just 15 minutes, everything turned to dust. Sounds unfair, right? But that's exactly how many kinds of pain arrive. Uninvited, without warning, without time to prepare. It's hard to accept that everything you nurtured with care can be destroyed in an instant. A relationship, a friendship, a life plan. All it takes is one unexpected moment to turn it all into rubble. And the cruelest part? You often don't realize how much something mattered until the moment it's gone. The pain isn't just in what was lost. It's in the time you invested, in the emotional energy no one else ever saw. But here's the part of the story no one really talks about. Someone who builds a tree house once knows how to build again. Maybe it won't be the same. Maybe it'll be slower. Maybe in a different tree, in a different forest, with more caution and fewer illusions. But inside that person lives a quiet force. Resilience. Because even when pain tears everything down, it leaves behind one undeniable truth. You still have the power to start from zero. And in that rebuilding, a deeper understanding is born about what truly belongs to you, about what really makes you, you. There's pain that doesn't get resolved. It gets integrated. It doesn't need to make sense. It doesn't need to be beautiful. It doesn't need a logical explanation, but it does need to be welcomed. Pretending it doesn't exist only makes the damage worse. Because what is denied doesn't disappear. It hides. And what hides eventually screams. Acknowledging your own anguish is an act of courage. It's like telling yourself, this is part of me too, and it's okay not to be okay. Pain doesn't define you, but it reveals you. It shows where your limits are, where your soul bleeds, where you still need to learn how to care for yourself. A lot of people try to silence those parts, with work, with distractions, with forced positivity. But ignoring your feelings doesn't fix anything. It just hardens you. And the more you harden, the harder it becomes to access what's real. Vulnerability isn't weakness. It's a direct gateway to your essence. And it's in that honesty with yourself that the construction of true emotional identity begins. When you stop running, you start listening. And then, curiously, loneliness begins to shift from silent enemy. It becomes a bridge to something deeper, a personal reflection on who you are, who you pretend to be, and who you are still becoming. Because being human is exactly that, carrying scars no one sees, and still choosing to keep going. Now tell me this, how many times have you tried to ignore what you feel, thinking that would somehow make you stronger? How many times have you smiled on autopilot, while everything inside you is silently screaming for help? Maybe it's time to stop running from what makes you human, to recognize that your pain isn't weakness. It's part of your story, and only those who have the courage to look inward can face the world with truth. So, what are you going to do with everything you just uncovered? Are you going to keep hiding your collapsed treehouse, pretending nothing ever happened? Or are you finally going to begin, brick by brick, to rebuild what truly makes you you? If this touched something inside you, if it woke something up you've been trying to silence, then go ahead, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Because here, we don't romanticize pain, we learn how to walk through it.